Today is May 29th, 2009. My name is Lori Preston, and we are here today at Randolph-Macon College in the McGraw-Page Library with Hilbert Hunter Hayslett, who is the class of 1959, also known as Hibby Hayslett. Also in the room are his wife, Jerry Ann, and Sarah Hendricks. Well, welcome to Randolph-Macon today.
Well, thank you.
We're happy to have you back and here. If you could tell us a little bit about how you first heard about Randolph-Macon.
Well, I went to Fairfax High School, and so it was a large enough school that it could attract the colleges to come in and participate in a college day. And so my senior year, Randolph-Macon was one of the schools represented, so I knew of Randolph-Macon College. But more closely was the information I got from my principal, Samuel J. Coffey, who was a 1931 graduate of, I found out later, I didn't know then, that he was a 31 graduate of Randolph-Macon College. And he was the one that sort of breathed life into the school other than just a name and a place.
Okay, thank you. Now, can you tell us about your arrival on campus, your first impressions of the campus? Now, you hadn't seen the campus?
No, I hadn't seen the campus before, and so came down. I was on a football scholarship, and so I came down in early August or mid-August for the preseason football practice, and so the campus was basically vacant except for the maybe 30 or 40 football players that were here. And so it had a sort of a different view, but it had a sort of an idyllic quality. The buildings and the trees and everything was neat. And of course, had one of the things I loved. I always loved trains, and so to have a railroad track running by the school was it was like dying going to heaven. You know, I could see the trains, and so it was just a comfortable place, and the buildings were impressive. I was a country boy, so I didn't see many Gothic buildings or with columns and all the things that you would see in a institution like this, and so it was very impressive. And of course, I was only 17 years old, and so I was a little bit wide-eyed.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the town when you first arrived?
Well, it was sort of like the towns I was used to a certain degree. We palled around together with two or three of us. Guys would go out and get ice cream or go to just explore and see what's around, and so we found it interesting. It didn't take us long to learn pretty much what there was to learn, but we always called them the townies, but there were always local people that lived locally, and we once we were identified as football players, we had some status, so that people would come over and talk to us, and so even though they didn't know that I was a freshman and didn't know much about anything, but it we became part of the community fairly quickly. Ashland's a very welcoming place, as is the college, and so it didn't take us long to fit in. We were by 2 or 3 days we were part of the scenery.
Now, which dormitory did you live in?
I lived in Thomas Branch.
Okay. And do you remember what floor you were on, or about where your room was?
I was on the first floor.
Okay. And how many roommates did you have?
I had one.
Just one.
Actually, the roommate I had, I went to. He was from Fairfax also. His name was Tom Wood.
Okay.
And he was a left-hand pitcher, so he played baseball.
Okay.
I think he didn't stay real long. He maybe stayed for a year or two, and so I had someone that I knew from high school, even though he wasn't a really close friend, but we had shared community and education history, so it was good to be with someone that was not a total stranger.
What did you think about the dormitory when you moved in?
Oh, it was real different. Dormitory life was really different. The dynamics of different people and their own peculiarities. We had some really peculiar people, and so, for example, we had 2 Saudi Arabian gentlemen that were up on the 3rd floor, and of course we would go around and some would play cards and some would do various things. So we'd go where the action was. We'd know what room was a meeting room where something was going on. But one of the things that we learned quickly was not to go into. I think the Abdullah Gil was the name I remember. You didn't go into their room without knocking, and the reason was that they would sit at their desk, put their feet up, and throw knives at the door.
Oh my!
and that was the way they amused themselves. It was fun. They bonk like this, and so you didn't walk in to do that. And of course, they were Saudi Arabia, and money wasn't a problem. So basically, whenever the door they would tear it up, they buy a new one. That wasn't it wasn't a problem. But it was a really neat kind of thing. And so I had never met anybody from Saudi Arabia before, and very nice people. But you run across some different things.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your close friends while you were here? A lot of the football guys, I'm sure.
Yeah, one of my close friends was Bobby Mizell. He was my roommate for I think a couple of years.
Okay.
And I haven't had much contact with him since school, but we spent a lot of time together. And I was actually I was a Phi Cap fraternity, and so I knew, but I was friends with was friends with a lot of people. As a matter of fact, one of my enduring friendships now is with a fellow called Sonny Williams. His name is Romy C. Williams, and his nickname is Sonny, and he was a really neat guy, and he lived in Thomas Branch. Interesting thing about Sonny was that he always had a new car. Oh. His dad ran a quarry down toward Charlottesville, beyond Charlottesville, and so Sonny was a real regular guy, but in my eyes, he had money. When he had that nice a car, so he actually drove a 55, 56 Corvette.
Oh, a nice car.
Red, and so it was neat to know him. And another friend was Paul Justison, and Bob Ferguson, whom I've kept in contact with. Andrew Jackson Johnson Jr., who played football and did weights, and just a number of other people that were and I've maintained contact with a lot of them.
Okay. Now, one thing we always like to know is how did you afford a Randolph-Macon college education? Did you have any jobs during the years? Did you have scholarship money? You came as a football player, I know.
Well, I didn't have. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't for Mr. Coffey. A conversation we had sometime after the Randolph-Macon representative was at the high school, and Mr. Coffey met me in the hall and said, "Hibby, do you ever think about going to college?" And I said, "Yeah," but we were on if the economic scale was 1 to 10, with 1 being not having very much, we were probably at 1 or maybe 0.95 or something like that. So we didn't have a lot of money. My grandfather was a janitor at the high school. My parents died both my parents died in my youth, and so I lived with my grandparents, and just wonderful people, but we just didn't have any money, and so me going to college based on my grandfather's salary or whatever he made was a non-starter. So Mr. Coffey asked the question, and what he wanted was an answer, and I said, yeah, and I eventually got around to, yeah, I'd sort of like to go. So within 30 days from the time I said, yes, I'd like to go, he had contacted Randolph-Macon, had sent my transcripts down, had arranged for me to be accepted based on my academic standing. He had arranged for a tuition scholarship. He had arranged for me to have a job in the cafeteria. He had arranged for a football scholarship. And so that would get me here. And of course, we were living, not hand to mouth. We had, but certainly not prepared to go out into the world, And so if you say put your things in a suitcase, I would say what suitcase? But I didn't have a suitcase. I didn't have many clothes, and so Mr. Coffey arranged from a local druggist who was a friend of the community for him to donate a amount of money to buy clothes so that I could have clothes to go to school and buy books. And so that when we talk about giving back, it sort of makes you want to choke up.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
bring strong feelings.
Did you you worked in the cafeteria?
Yeah.
Did you have any other jobs here on campus?
No, I did mostly in the cafeteria and played football. That was a
Right.
job.
Right,
I
I'm
guess,
sure.
to a certain degree.
What did you do in the cafeteria?
I bust tables for the most part, but what I did was the job that I got that worked best with football was rolling silver. So what you would do is we had flatware, metal flatware, and so what we would do, it would have to go through the dishwasher and be sanitized. Then it would be brought out, and so rather than have the people fumble for picking knives, forks, and spoons, things like that, they had to be rolled up and put in a napkin, and so that you could come get your tray, grab the silverware, and then get your food like that. And so my job was to do that, and it worked well because as long as I kept enough silverware there, then I could come in late and do my work. It wasn't as time sensitive as some other things like bussing the tables, because you always needed somebody there to clear the tables and wipe the trays, and so I worked with. I think I was one of the there were only 2 or 3 people. There were only and most of them were people working in the kitchen were blacks, and so I developed neat friendships with them and Frank and Watson. They were the two.
Frank and Watson.
Frank and Watson. Frank was the go-to guy. He knew everything, and so Watson was an older guy, and he sort of rambled around and did whatever he could, and so it was a sort of a fraternity. Everybody, we joked and got and played around and so I had it was nice in those days. It was the blacks were part of a totally different culture. They lived in a location, and so we were friends there. But that was the only connection.
Right.
Of course, in my lifetime, that changed, which I'm very pleased to have seen and be a part of.
Now, you worked there your full 4 years.
Yes.
Excuse me. Okay.
I'm sorry. That's considered nowadays working for the cafeteria. I understand is considered a good job, as opposed to I don't know what a bad job is, but who knows? Probably human development. But was that considered a good job? I mean, was that a job that other students would?
Oh
have
yeah,
liked?
as a matter of fact, let's see, Bob Duncan, who was in our fraternity, was also, I think, was president of student government. He had a job in the cafeteria, and so there were people who were. It wasn't a status kind of thing or a class kind of thing, So it wasn't. Nobody ragged on me because I worked in the cafeteria. So I didn't feel. I felt that it was a natural thing to do. It's what you did. Some people did, some people didn't. And there was obviously there was in any grouping there's an economic spread, and you can see it, and some of it was visible, but it was never played very hard, at least in most areas that I was involved in.
Can you tell us something about sort of what the typical meals were like? I know our students complain so much about the food now. We like to let them know what their choices used to be.
Well, we had, I think when we had roast beef, we called it rope meat. Because what they would do is you would buy the rolls of meat, probably bound, held together, and then it would be sliced. And when they slice it, then they couldn't get all the strings out of it, and so occasionally you would get piece of string and in with the meat, and so it was. I mean, it was not unsanitary or anything like that. It was just the way it was, the presentation, and so it was. We had the servers there, and it was. You could say, "Oh, give me double of this," or some extra of this or that and the other, and you could get that. But we had lasagna and spaghetti and vegetables, and occasionally we had I can't remember. I think we had some hamburgers and French fries on occasion, and I think the complaint is universal. I think it's I think that is a part of living is to think that food is better elsewhere, and like breakfast is always better at Speed and Briscoe than it was coming to the cafeteria.
You have to explain what
Tell us
Speed and
about
Briscoe is.
Speed and Briscoe. I don't think we've heard about Speed and Briscoe.
Oh, my.
Well, Speed and Briscoe was this was before 95 was through. This was and so Route 1 about 2 or 3 miles toward Richmond to south. It was a Speed and Briscoe truck stop, and there.
Oh, the truck stop. Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody ever gave us the name of it before.
Yeah, a Speed and Briscoe truck stop, and you could go down there, and it was open 24 hours, and you could get eggs and hash browns and coffee for 35 cents.
That was wonderful.
Wow.
And extra, and so the deal was. Anytime that you felt any out of sorts or do anything, let's go down to Speed Briscoe, get some eggs. That was the deal. So you'd always find somebody, and who wants to go? Or somebody yell out, going down to Speed Briscoe, load up, and the car would you always had full car, you didn't have anything to see, and go down there and you get toast and we go in there and talk and drink coffee and it was a really good hangout, and of course it was cheap and the food was good, and so it attracted. Late at night, particularly when you, for example, I say we got to study late, so you'd study at up to 10 o'clock, and like that. Well, my version of studying, and then you say, well, let's go down there and get some coffee and some food, and then you go for a couple of more hours after that. So it was a really neat hangout, and the truckers put up with us. We didn't mess with them, but we were loud and juvenile, of course, and the truckers were, of course, truckers, and they're working and busy and tired and whatever like this, but they put up with us, and so we had a good relationship.
What other local hangouts were there? Where else did you go?
Well, we went to the movies, and they had an ice cream store. We'd go to the ice cream store, and then I didn't actually hang out at Hughes Drugstore, but I'd got a job there. That was one of the places I did work for spending money when toward my senior year when I needed more money and economic demands, and so I went down and got a job, and I think one of the high school seniors worked there, and so Dr. T.W.L. Hughes was a local icon. Everybody knew T.W.L. Hughes, and so. But anyhow, we got a job there, and so I would make. They had a real soda fountain, and so you'd make sundaes and all sorts of things, and so I would go there like 2 or 3 days a week, and maybe get 10 hours a week there. So good spending money, and that, of course, that's where I met Jerry Ann.
Oh, I wondered about that. I was going to ask you that next. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, I can tell you my side of the story. And they had some chairs and a window in front. It's actually, I think, the train store. There's a model train store. I think it's in that same building. And so, but they have the windows there, and so
right, the building's still there.
Yeah.
The drugstore closed in 1989,
Yeah.
but it still says Hughes.
So they had some tables up front, and so booths, and kids would come in and buy whatever they wanted to get, and then wait for the rides or whatever, and hang out. And so they showed up, and so one day, real good-looking young woman showed up, and so I noticed her, but I was she was obviously in high school. I knew she was in high school, and I was in college, and so you between locals and college, you don't make assumptions. Just because somebody you don't. I didn't feel like it was appropriate to hit on anybody. So, the fellow who worked from the town who worked in the store with me is named Ray Tate, and so I asked Ray who she was, and then after some time asked if he knew that if she was dating anybody, had a steady or anything like that. So I don't remember so much about the day-to-day contact. Finally, somewhere along the way, I introduced myself and talked to her. And I don't remember so much. I don't think I had any memorable lines or anything like that.
Yeah. Now, we've heard the term calicoing used in dating local girls. Is that a term you've ever heard?
No.
Okay, because we've heard it from several people. And there's actually a poem
Yeah, no,
about
I
it.
didn't
Okay.
use that term is not,
Okay,
not familiar.
so it may
But-
have dropped by then.
But anyhow, and so I eventually we talked and wanted to. I wanted to have some contact with her, and so I think one of the things I arranged to get invited out to your house for dinner.
So we'd love to hear about what your impressions were of this Randolph-Macon man.
Well, I don't know that I knew that he was a Randolph-Macon man. I was, as he said, in high school and played sports, and after practice, which of course meant staying after school, I would miss the school bus that gave me my official ride home. I lived about 5 miles out of town. I would go to the drugstore and do homework or whatever. If there were friends there, chat with them. And, he was just this cute guy that worked there. And I think he might have asked if he could get me anything from the fountain, and I had no money to spend, so never got anything. But somehow he did strike up a conversation, and after we had become acquainted, just casual conversation, I don't remember the exact sequence of events, how he asked about going out, wanting to go on a date, maybe going to dinner, doing something. I don't remember exactly what it was. And knowing my parents, I thought that they might want to meet him before they allowed their daughter to go out with him. And so I invited him out, and I'm sure that I arranged with my mother first to see if it was all right if he maybe came out for dinner. And then, of course, I had this idea that, well, if he was coming to dinner, I should probably be the one to prepare dinner. And so I did. And I don't know if you want the rest of the story or not.
Well, let me chip in something here. So the mechanics, I didn't have a car. So she lived 5 miles out in the country. And so it wasn't real couth as far as I was concerned to try to get her dad to come in and pick me up. And so this is where you begin to lean on your friends. And so Sonny Williams comes into play. And so Sonny was a nice guy, and I said, Sonny, how would you like to have a nice home cooked meal? And what was that sound funny? He says, yeah. And we went on and on. And so finally, he said, yeah, I'll give you a ride, because that was the deal. And so, and in the Corvette, no less. And so,
Red Corvette convertible.
Yeah, and so we wound up going out there. Now, one of the sidelights to the story is that, and a real faux pas on my part, is that I had this tremendous appetite. I had a bottomless pit. I could eat tons of food. And so I was afraid that I would embarrass myself by eating too much out there. So we were going to go out for Sunday dinner. I think it was Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock after church. So what I decided to do was I would go to the cafeteria and eat a regular meal, and then I would be able to go to the house and eat normally like a normal person, so I did. So somebody 18, 19-year-old, really logical, educated thinking, So I'll be all prepared. So I ate the meal and went out to her house, and then she fixed tell them about
It
your.
was spaghetti. It was, spaghetti and garlic toast and salad and, something fairly easy, but I made a lot of it. And so he had some, and Sonny had some, and the rest of the family had spaghetti. And I knew that he had a huge appetite. He was a football player. He was a big guy, so certainly he wanted seconds. He was dying. He was so full.
And I didn't know until later that, of course, I had to compete, made a big faux pas.
And I was crushed. I thought he didn't like my cooking because he didn't eat as much as I thought he was.
And unfortunately, I didn't make as big an impression on her dad because when we talked to her, she talked to her dad later. What did he say?
Well, he said that he was far more impressed with the other fellow. And I think it was truly the car.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you made your choice, and he's
Yes,
been
I
eating your
did.
cooking since.
And I did not make a mistake either, despite my father's.
So we're coming up on 49 years. So.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. Now, you mentioned you belonged to a fraternity.
Yes, the Phi Kappa Sigma.
Mm-hmm.
And we were right across from the church.
Okay. Did you ever live in the house? Or
Yeah,
were,
yeah,
okay.
I lived in the house for 1 year, I think my junior year.
Okay.
And it wasn't a smart choice to do. It was okay to do that. We had it was tough during parties, but it wasn't that we were interfered with our studying or anything like that. Because during party time we weren't studying, and but we were just rats. We were just rats. Our room was unkempt, and we had to run people out of our room during party time, and it was scuzzy living, and but it was, we all got along, and it all worked out, but it was not, we weren't living high at all. It wasn't, there was nothing classy about it, but we had a good time.
Well, that's always important.
Yeah.
So what else were you involved in then, in addition to football and your fraternity? Let's see. Your yearbook states that you were the junior class secretary?
It could have been, yeah. It did involve work, so that's probably the reason that they...
Made an impression.
Yeah, that's probably the reason that I
Okay.
was involved in that.
You were a student assistant in Spanish,
Yes.
romance language major.
Yeah, and my major professor was L. Paul Miller. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. And, of course, I learned to appreciate him more as time went on. And I kept in contact with him after I graduated and in future years. So we had a friendship beyond school. But with my economic background and immaturity, it was obvious that I was sort of a country boy who grew up with, and I was smart enough. I was always smart enough to handle the work, but culture wasn't a big deal, and so my saving grace was that I took 3 years of Latin in college, in high school. So I was. And I had very good teachers in high school. So I came, despite the fact that I was sort of a diamond in the rough, so to speak, I came relatively well prepared in fundamentals, and except I wasn't very cultured. And so and I think Professor Miller saw that. He was a sort of a country boy himself, and I think he identified with me. And so he nurtured me along a little bit. He gave me some boosts and talked to me and was patient with me and understood me probably better than most of my professors. And I really did need that. And because I was started at 17, and my grandparents were uneducated, and so most of the culture and things that I got in terms of academic culture was self-starting. That I read the books and inquired and things like that. And so it's not to diminish my grandparents, but to learn about the world and the modern world and how everybody else lived. It took some growing up, and I think Professor Miller saw that. And in addition to teaching me Spanish, he mentored me in other ways, and I much to his credit, and very, very instrumental in my being successful in school.
Was it really his influence that made you major in languages, or
No,
had you
I did it because it was
intended
easy.
Oh, okay. Confession.
Yeah, in high school, I think we took one Spanish class, and I would just max. It was just easy for me. Once you take Latin, and then Spanish, if you take Spanish, then they're companion languages, and same with, well, of course, Latin being the root, and it was just easy. I could just click, just like some people can see math and say, oh, this formula, you X, you solve a Y, and like that. Languages work the same way with me. My mind worked that way, and so I got encouraged by my success, and so and I could actually see myself being in the Foreign Service or being a translator or something like that, because I really liked the language and enjoyed the activity, but. It was so that encouragement, and I liked it, and of course the professors were good. Small classes, which is very good. In some of my classes, particularly language classes, 5 or 6 people with a professor, so you really got a lot of attention. Sometimes more than you need. Like when you go to sleep in class.
Oh,
I
can't hide.
But just one story. I have to tell this. Professor Miller was such had a dry wit, and it showed the sort of relationship we had. We had a class we were reading Spanish novels, and so it was, and so we were translating them, talking about them, and so it was 2:30 in the afternoon, and of course most of the time you'd have the classes in the morning, and in the afternoons you would have labs or study, whatever. And so 2:30 in the afternoon, awful time to have a class. So came in the first day in class, and he came in and he says, well, this is not a good schedule for me. He says, this interferes with my nap time. So he says that if I should happen to doze off or anything like that, you could just quiet, tiptoe out and let me sleep. And just laughed, just a joke. So I could go to sleep in class at a drop of a hat. I was always sleep deprived. And so one day we're reading, and came to be my turn. I was sound asleep. So he punched me. He said, "Mr. Hayslett, are you ready to read?" And I looked up and I said, "Professor Miller," I said, "at the beginning of the semester you said that if you fell asleep during class because it was an afternoon class, that you would ask us to have the courtesy of leaving you alone and be quiet and let you sleep. And I was wondering if you would return that courtesy to your students." And I mean, this was a 18-year-old to a professor, and so brazen I was, but he smiled, and you got a point, and he went on to the next person. But he put up with stuff like that, and still was a good teacher and a mentor to me. So that was a good commentary on him as a person.
Well, we did see that he was your advisor for your senior project here. One thing we were curious about is that it's dated February 62, even though you were class of 1959. Is there a story behind that?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. I don't know. Of course, I've told this many times, but I didn't take the high road academically, and I was telling Sarah that my idea of studying was, and the best way to study was, you would identify who the best students were in the class that I was taking, who took the best notes, and make sure that you were friends with them. And then whenever it came time for a test or an exam, then would ask them when they were studying and ask if you could join, and they would always say yes. And so I was always a good guy. I was never a troublemaker, and so we'd sit there and have discussions, go over their notes, and hit all the high points, and I'd study with them. And so I never took notes. A lot of times I didn't go to class. We had 3 cuts. You had 3 unexcused absences. absences. That was the limit per semester. Well, I acquired a reputation of being a relatively good student. I always passed, always didn't cause any trouble, and so I basically would absent myself from class pretty much whenever I wanted to. I went to class when I felt like it and didn't go others. I sort of gauge if it was important to go, I would go. If it wasn't important, I didn't go. And but I always managed to. As a matter of fact, one semester, coming down for football practice, I think I'd worked in the summer and I had about $200 saved up to buy books. So showed up for football practice about August the 15th. By the first week in September, I didn't have any book money. We'd gone to the movies and other things like this. And so I carried 18 semester hours and didn't buy any books. And so, but I made 2.5. And but the system works. I knew the right people and I borrowed the books on it. And and the sad part of that is, and I tell this in redemption for future people. I went into the Air Force, and I was an officer in the Air Force, and the Air Force would have sent me to any college. Once I was established, they would have paid for a master's degree. I could have gone for a PhD if I'd wanted to. The only problem is when they sent for my transcript and looked at my academic performance based on my immaturity and lack of. They looked at it and said, "This is not someone that we want to invest our academic, because your record goes with you." And I'd redeemed myself by that time. I was always smart enough, but in some cases, as someone said along the way, good looks and charm would only take you so far, and the record, was there. And so even though I was well educated, I couldn't parlay a mediocre record into an Air Force master's degree. And so I had to actually get a master's degree by working, while I was working full-time at the Air Force.
But how did your absences catch up with you on your
Well,
thesis?
in the last semester, I was behind on my senior project, so I probably was not going to finish that. I was still struggling with that, but I was carrying 3 classes, all of them Romance language classes. And springtime, and I started playing golf and doing whatever, and just not going to class. I had A and 2 B's in the classes, so I was doing all the academics. Dr. Roberts called me in one day in April, and he said, "Hibby, we've got a problem." He said, "You missed too many classes." And I said, "Well, but I'm still doing the work." And he says, "There is a school requirement that you attend a minimum number of classes, and you haven't done that." And I said, "Well, I'll start coming to class." He says, "It won't work. If you attended every class from here on out, you can't meet the academic requirement." So he said, they flunked me all 3 classes.
Oh, no.
And after literally letting me do that for about 3 or 4 years, it was sort of, I'd sort of been led into that mode. But for some reason, Dr. Roberts was minding the store at that particular time, and it was no fault but my own. So I ended up having to. Then of course we were serious. Jerry and I were serious by that time, and so in September of '60, this was. Of course, I left school in May of '59, and so by September of '60, we had progressed to the point where we were being married, and no better friend, no worse enemy, and so she was on me to get that project done, and so I had to pick up the 3 classes and do the senior project, and I had a job at the highway department that I was working full time and living here in Ashland.
Living in Ashland, working in Richmond, and he worked a deal with the highway, his boss at the highway department, to allow him enough time off with his to use his annual leave to combine with his lunch hour, and he drove out to Randolph-Macon and took the classes while he was working full-time in Richmond. And then he completed his project, and I typed it for him.
And we did notice that he acknowledged you and thanked you for that.
And there is not enough paper or ink to tell you how important her support was to getting that done. She was the engine. I was the caboose.
Okay. Can you tell us about some of the other people who had an influence on you here at the college? Some of the other professors or some of the administrators?
Well, I'm trying to go through the order of merit here, but in any case, one of the courses that I really enjoyed was geology. I took a geology course from Dr. Schuyler Miller, he taught, and a one-semester course, but I loved it. And I still use what I learned there and have studied on my own, but it was just a wonderful class, and he was just a wonderful teacher. And so I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Professor Hasker. I was telling Jerry on the way down one of the stories. You picture professors by the likely grade that you could get out of them, the easier professors. And it doesn't mean that they weren't good teachers, but some were just easier to deal with than others. And so I think this was probably sophomore English. And so at the time, Dr. Webb, we call him Spider Webb, very tall, distinguished professor, and he taught English. And so signed up for his class, went into class down in Smithy Hall, walked in, every seat was filled, people lined up all around the walls, and Dr. Webb came in and he said, "Oh, this will never do," and he said, "This," and he called a series of names then, and they said, "You go up to Professor Hasker's room." So I was one of the ones selected, so went up, trooping up, and there was Professor Hasker and two people in the room with him. And he said, "Well, here are the unlucky SOBs."
Oh my God.
And because he had a reputation of being tough, and he liked it, and but he was a good teacher, and you learned a lot. You just had to work like hell for that, and so I toughed it out. But and he actually became one of our sponsors of our fraternity, and so he was not unfriendly in terms of disdain of us, but there was no give in his work, and he gave hard exams, and I got a C in it, and I was as proud as any A I've ever gotten. It was, and so that was another story. I had another English professor, Professor McElwain, and he was a very small, slight individual, and I think he still lives in the area probably. And but in any case, after being in his class and being away from school, I was in the Air Force, and so this was early, probably 1970s. And I came back, and I just wanted to see the college, and I was walking up toward Mary Branch, which were the offices were still there. The administrative offices were still in the bottom of Mary Branch at the time. So I saw Dr. McElwain, or Professor McElwain, come walking down the sidewalk, and I said, I'll surprise him by knowing his name and say hi. And so I walked by and said, "Hi, Professor McElwain, how you doing?" He says, "Hi, Ibby." And walked on by. He hadn't seen me. I was in his class as a sophomore, which was probably 57, 58, and this was in 1970. Oh. And so this gives you the idea of how you fit at Randolph-Macon. It's, and that is the story. It's not that it was me or Professor McElwain, but the fact is that there's a real sense that your professor who you had a relationship with will remember you if you saw him even casually, and that's that's a wonderful thing to have for an institution, for a good reputation.
Okay. Well, since we've heard about your college years, can you tell us a little bit about what you did after graduation?
Well, I went immediately into the Air Force. It was, of course, an interesting route. I think I was sharing some of this with Sarah. You know, we were talking while we were walking. But in any case, I received a deferment. During those days, they were deferring military age people. And so the draft board, as long as I was in college, but the minute that I was out of college, and I think by the time in December of '61, then I had finished the academics with the senior project, and so come February, I got a letter, greetings, it's time for you to serve the country. And of course, I'd already completed the academics for the degree, and of course, Randolph-Macon confers only in June, and or May, such as the time. I think it was June at that time, and so you don't have the degree until it's conferred, even though you've done all the academics. So they didn't care whether I completed it or not. And so we talked to Jerry Ann. I said, I got to do something about this. And so I went up to the draft board and pleaded with them. Basically said, will you give me a chance to take an officer's exam to apply and be accepted? And if I don't, I'm going to serve. If I'm accepted as an officer, I'll serve in that way. So in either way, I'm going to serve the country. And so it was persuasive. They were nice enough to give me a chance. And so I went down to Langley Field and took the test. And despite all the math for a language major, it was one of those days where the muse was sitting on my shoulder and translating Spanish into numbers. And I passed the test and went into the Air Force. And so I spent 21 years in the Air Force, various locations, wonderful life, saw many, many things. And of course, my partner here traveled with me most places. And so we had the most memorable tour. It was the next to the last one when we were in Iran. I was a military advisor to the Iranian Air Force. And I was a major and selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel. And so, and we were there, and of course, it was we got there in July of '78, and the Shah was beginning to crumble, and burning tires in the street and lots of problems. And then the Shah left in January 16th of '79. Khomeini came back in February the 1st. And and we were there, and Jerry Ann and the family were there with me up until the 1st of January.
And we had 3 children at that time, and they were ages 2.5 to 12, 13.
Yeah.
And so I was evacuated with the 3 children, 5 suitcases, and an Air Force cargo plane. And dumped off in Athens, Greece, and then finally in New York City, and no money, and no home, and no husband, and no school records, and and he was still back there. He did not get out until
February the 17th. We were there, and we had to be negotiated out by the time Khomeini had taken over on the 10th. I think the 10th of February they had the Omar Farr revolution, and basically the government was disestablished, and people were roaming the streets, and so we were hiding out, and I had a .357 Magnum pistol, and they were my boss said you better hide it, so I took it, put it in a plastic bag, tied a string on it, and put it inside the commode. Hid it so that they found me with a weapon. And so also hide your ID. So I took the insignia off the uniforms and took my ID card and put it in my shoe and did various things just so that they wouldn't know we were military. Wow. And so we had to be negotiated out. They had to send Pan Am to get us out. So it was a trying time. It was I had they shot they stormed the house and came. We were in this big house, and it had an atrium and a stairway up to the top and a flat roof. Well, most of the roofs are flat in that part of the world, and so and they were able to shoot down through the atrium into the bathroom where I was. They didn't know I was there.
But they had stormed the neighborhood. It was the whole ragtag bunch of people.
And so the owners had gone back to England. They had enough money, and they saw the problems, and they took off. And they had a house sitter, an engineer, an Iranian engineer. His name was Mahmoud. And I had come up. I had actually moved out of the house, and 4 or 5 of us officers were staying in one place for common security. And so, but I went up to this house just one day just to talk and look through, see if I could salvage anything, because we knew we were going to leave everything. And so I said, Mahmoud, I'm upstairs. So that was the day that they decided to storm the area and look for Americans, look for CIA agents and things like that. And so I saw them creeping across the roof, and I locked myself in. The east door had a lock, so I locked myself from the kitchen back into the bathroom. Had a jar of peanut butter, my gun, and telephone. And so we just hung out there, and so after a couple of hours, after the shot came down and a lot of yelling and screaming and shooting and things like this, then all of a sudden it got quiet, and we sat for another hour. Just
The we is him.
Right.
Me and my
His gun.
Yeah.
me and my evil twin. But in any case, so after I came downstairs, and I knocked on the I said, Mahmoud, what's going on? He said, of course, SAVAK headquarters was the secret police headquarters. We were right up against their wall. So during good times, it was the safest place to be, because you didn't nobody messed with SAVAK. So we knew that we'd be safe. But once the Shah was gone, then everybody wanted to get back at SAVAK for having killed their families and imprisoned them and hurt them and everything like this. And so they were coming, and he says they came through and they're looking for CIA agents and other and American officials. And he said, are any of them around? They asked me, and he says, nah. I told them they all got scared and left. And
He knew that it was upstairs.
Right.
So, man. And so, and we weren't good friends. We weren't buddies or anything like that. It was just a decent person. So I have an abiding feeling that there are a lot of good people in Iran, despite the fact that we're politically opposed. And so I think there are a lot of good people there, like Mahmoud, that will make the right kind of decisions. So I'm optimistic.
Good. I hope your other positions were less eventful.
Yeah, they were less eventful.
Okay. How did you stay in contact with the college after graduation?
Well, Jerry Ann has relatives and I have relatives in Northern Virginia and aunts, and she has a sister and other individuals
Relatives. We live in the area here.
So we kept in touch with them, and then it became a natural flow. And then the alumni office does a really good job. While we were out in California, we had our teams came out. Mike Carter and various other people came out and visited California, and then we got invited to meetups and things like this. And so that we were really made to believe, and truly so, that we were still a part of the community. And so once I've retired and had more time on my hands, I kept in touch with Susan and various other individuals. But the school has always been welcoming. We always made you feel that we were important. And they were caring. And just as I told you, Professor McElwain, that is the spirit that the school exudes, has all along. And so now that I've had more time as a retiree, I'm tapped into that, and so I feel very, very welcome, and I'm really glad to be a part of the community.
Well, we're happy you came. Okay. Well, and of course you've created a scholarship, and we'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
It
Or-
was scholarship to be created. I think it's a trust is
The trust
I
that
can
is a
just tell you- I can tell you
pre-scholarship, I believe,
very-
or
I can tell
can
you
you
very
tell?
briefly, and I don't remember how long ago, but every Christmas I tried to give him something really special, and I had replaced his class ring, for instance, which he had lost. I replaced his his letter jacket, which he had worn out. And so one year I just had the thought how nice it would be to have a scholarship in his name.
These are annual scholarships as well.
Right. And I talked to, and I cannot remember the name of the person, but I talked to somebody at the university. I was really wanting to try to create some type of an endowment, but it wasn't within my financial means to be able to do that. But she did talk about a scholarship that could be renewed each year. So I started it out, and then each year, then he, of course, it became his scholarship, and so it's now a joint collaborative effort, but in his name. And so we try to keep that. And I think the main criteria is that it goes to someone with financial need,
And,
which reflects his situation.
and because of the background of the work of Mr. Coffey and all the kindnesses to me, then there's no way that I could ever return it in kind, but it's sort of like paying forward a little bit to share in some way, to recognize that people have helped me, and it was very important to me, and so to try to make an effort to recognize the value of that, and of course Jerry Ann understood that, and I thank her for the impetus of doing that. And of course it's something that gives me such great joy that I just can't stay away from it. So I just I want to be a part of it. So.
Well, it's a meaningful way to make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
So,
Incredible difference.
incredible difference. These are all the official questions we have. If there's any other stories or anything you'd like to share with us.
I don't know. Jerry Ann may have some other things. I don't have any. I think there are many other things that I could go on about, but I think the principal ideas and activities that give you a sense of what happened during my time with Randolph-Macon, and my feelings about it, I think have been captured, and I'm just really glad to be a part of the community. It's very meaningful. I'm part of the committee for the reunion, and we talk about class gifts and other things like that. And I said that Randolph-Macon, particularly in times where these are not really good economic times for a lot of people, and I said, but if you want to look for something of value to do with whatever resource you have, Randolph-Macon is something of value. And so that if anybody has any resources and money you want to put in a safe place, or make sure it will be used well and will contribute to the future, then Randolph-Macon is a wonderful way to do it. So I felt easily committed to being part of the process of working with the reunion and trying to persuade other people to come and participate and to be a part of the community and contribute in whatever way that was appropriate for them to do. So it was again another opportunity to be a part of the growth and ongoing vision of Randolph-Macon.
Okay. Well, then I guess we're done. Thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much.
being here. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know that you guys have to have is it
Is a lunch?
No, I think it's a walk. So we're just
Oh, I thought you said there was a luncheon or something. We had to
no.
do.
No, I don't know whether
We've
there's
got the schedule in the car. We should go take a look.
Well, if I might have missed if there isn't a
It's
lunch
off
thing,
now, by the way, so.
I would love to if you guys want to go grab lunch at the Iron Horse or something. I would love to take
That would be
you.
great. Let's look at the schedule. It's in the car. I thought you had.
I just got to somewhere along the way I've got to pick up the scrapbook, but I think that can be done anytime this afternoon. Or
Okay,
yes.
as I said, I don't know what the schedule is. But if
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be absolutely delighted to.
Do you
Yeah.
mind walking
No,
with
of
us
course
to the
not.
car and
Yeah,
we'll
and
check it out?
Let me give you my card so that
Oh,
when you come
wonderful.
back for your reunion, you can just, if you email
Right.
me or give me a call or something, we could set up a time.
Excellent.
So, because I will certainly be here all the time in September because it's our busy time. It's not a day I'll be gone, so.
And here's mine.
Okay. And,
I give you my card
just
before
make
you-
sure, and in your senior yearbook, one thing we found is sometimes these have been out of order or not labeled properly. So I want to make sure I get
That's
the
me.
right picture.
That's me. That's my.
Okay.
That's. I.
Just want to make
I
sure I
had
get the right picture.
I had a hair
because-
transplant.
You know, they don't have your junior on here.
Yeah.
He's always carried the junior. His
Okay.
father died when he was 5 weeks old, but he has
Okay.
always carried the junior in honor
Uh-huh.
of his father. I never realized they
When
didn't
we
have junior in the.
Put that on the website. Would you like me to include the junior with your name?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
And,
I will
and
definitely
on the
do so.
scholarship, it's listed
Make
as
notation,
it's
yeah.
listed as junior, and so it's not. The only reason being that it for me it gives a connection because my father died when I was 5 weeks old, and so
sorry.
but it of course since I'm a junior, it tells everybody that my father who my father was.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, there is. I think it's a quote, but I mean, there really is something in a name. You know?
Right. Tells his family history.
It is. I think and it's the idea of these name scholarships. I think the name in the lives are enormously important. And I do think that you talk about the cyclic nature. Hopefully next year or the year after, you can come to one of the scholarship banquets. But this past year, in President Lindgren's remarks, I mean, he talked about there's nothing. If you think of the college as being a cycle, right, of the falls and the commencements and the summers, and life, of course, being a larger cycle. But that scholarships really, it's like the past, present, it's the entire college.
Yeah.
It's every experience. I mean, they're very, very.
Yeah, I did come to one.
You came to the first one.
First one, and I got my picture taken with
With the
the
recipient.
recipient. With the recipient. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And,
But they're, it is, but I feel like scholarships more than anything are paybacks, the cycle, not paybacks, it's not the right word.
Well, thank you. That was a nice interview.
Thank you.